Oh, thank you, Natalia, for moderating that last panel of our conference. Lots of positive energy from the table. Projects that humanize these personal transformations. Lots of years of hard work from the individuals at the table, Vanessa, Cristina, Vicente. We're receiving messages from our online listeners saying how much they're enjoying these sessions. Matias Gonzalez will now introduce Amador. Those of you that are taking part as part of this university course, we have an online platform where we will share all of the materials from these 2 days. Those of us who are joining us online, if you would like to access these materials, please send us an email and we will forward the presentations to you. It's great that we have streamed this event online because we will be able to keep all of these very valuable contributions for posterity. I would like to ask you if you wouldn't mind at the end of the event today to stick around to take a big group photo. Matias Gonzalez will now introduce Amador. Yes, thank you very much.
Y también la responsabilidad de presentar esta mañana para cierre esta jornada a Amador Fernández.
It's an honor to introduce Amador Fernández Savater.
Bueno, podríamos describirlo, lo pueden ver en muchas solapas de libros, ¿no? Investigador social independiente.
He is a researcher, thinker. He is often described as a pirate philosopher, activist. But I would like to highlight the fact that Amador's thinking, at least in this country, is perhaps one of the most influential that exists right now. Lots of people have read about the influence that Amador's writing has created, and I think it's a wonderful way to finish this 2-day conference, hearing from him. He asks very important questions regarding the current challenges facing our society. And I think what he's going to share with us today will link very well with all of the topics that have been discussed over the past 2 days. I think it's a great decision to have invited him to join us. Amador considers thinking as an essentially practical process, situated, connected, let's say, and provocative and engaged. What I personally enjoy about Amador's philosophizing is that he doesn't just look at things from a very general perspective. He really digs into the details. He really gets to grips with the problem at hand.
desde ahí intenta construir un pensamiento
and how current society is suffering.
lúcido y comprometido.
And from that basis,
No he tenido la suerte de
he
leer
draws very valuable conclusions. I haven't been able to read everything that he's written, but I highly recommend that you do
Amador.
enjoy some of his works.
No está preocupado afortunadamente por hacer un
Thankfully, he's not concerned with creating conclusions, philosophical conclusions. Rather, he's trying to launch debate with his reflections. It's something that's evolving. He's building useful thought through his work based on the changes in reality, and I'm going to leave it there. So, the title of the presentation today is about these three ecologies. He connects the interpersonal with the social, and the social with the natural ecosystem. So it's these three concepts. He jumps between the three. So he will talk about the intimate ecology, the social ecology, and the terrestrial ecology. So thank you, Amador. Please go ahead. You can hear me okay, great. Well, I've had quite a build-up from Matthias. Thank you for your words. I hope that what I share with you today will resonate with you and will draw on what's been spoken about the past 2 days. Philosophy, as I understand it, isn't a recipe. It doesn't offer solutions, and I mistrust those who are constantly seeking solutions. Philosophy, rather, is useful, but it's not utilitarian. It can help us to change our vision about something, to think in a different way. And by thinking differently about something, we might be able to find solutions that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So I, as I say, don't trust those who have a very clear vision of what needs to be done. So philosophy then, as I say, helps us to see things in different ways, to look at a different angle on a problem, a conflict, or a specific concept. So I hope that what I will share with you now will be helpful in this regard. I also wanted to begin by something that comes from the world of psychoanalysis, that we should start from something that isn't working. Perhaps there's somebody here who's taking part in psychoanalytical practices as an analyst or someone being analysed, or they will know that the principle, the starting point is suffering, that life is hard, it hurts, that something has been harmed. And this is the starting point. We don't go directly towards the solution, the recipe. We don't give good news. Optimism can be a terrible thing sometimes. Not everything needs to be perfect. What we have to do in psychoanalysis is look at what's not working, what's hurting. And we need to start there so that we're not kidding ourselves. Because we have too many stories that we tell ourselves to distract us from what is going wrong. And so, 3 symptoms can accompany these 3 ecologies. Let's try and link these symptoms at intimate, social, and environmental level. First, at intimate level, individual level, there is a phenomenon that I think is worrying, and that is the crisis of mental health, this epidemic of panic attacks among young people. We really are facing an epidemic in this regard. So there is a mental health crisis. Something's not working, so what is it that's not working? Then, at a social level, the symptom there is what we could say the overflow of schools, healthcare centres, community fabrics. There's spilling over, saturation of all of these things. And then, environmental level, that's very clear. The symptoms are something that's not working about our way of living. Our economic model is not working in an environmental sense. We're losing biodiversity. Life is becoming, ecosystems are becoming simplified. And so this is a symptom in relation to the planet, something that we have to listen to. Symptoms are trying to tell us something about what's happening. We have to look at things from this perspective of the symptom. So what I'm trying to say is that individual, social and planetary level, there is a symptom that is common to all 3. Perhaps you agree with me, and that is this overflow, saturation. We often say, I can't give anymore. I've given everything I can. Bodies can't give anymore. The world can't give anything else. What does this mean, and why can't we? What's happening? This is reaching such a point that we are on the verge of collapse. At intimate level, I'm talking about depression, exhaustion, panic attacks, anxiety. This can all lead to depression, and the depression would be the collapse. Depression rates are sky high, as you know. At a social level, we're talking about the explosion of places, links, institutions. Everyone's talking about this TV series on Netflix, Adolescence. This is demonstrative of these links with teachers, with parents that aren't working, that have stopped working, that have imploded. And then Marx talked about the inorganic land. We're talking about how the life cycles are being interrupted. Nature is collapsing. And this is something that we need to take very seriously. We need to take these symptoms very seriously. And not kid ourselves and not tell ourselves lies. So collapse is intimate, social and environmental at the same time. So that's the first thing. So how can we interpret these symptoms? What's happening? Why is there an epidemic in panic attacks? Why are institutions of social connection overflowing? Why is there such a high level of economic, environmental destruction? I know we don't have much time, so I'll try to summarize, but basically, there's a similar principle of reality, and that is the principle of performance. We need to perform. Bodies need to be productive. We need to go to the gym. We need to be present on social media. And then, of course, our relationships are put under stress because of this, and our relationship with the environment. So there's this principle of performance, which is seen now as a reality. So it's present in our relationships and also our relationship with the planet. And it's not just that we're receiving the message that we have to perform. We've absorbed this idea. We've interiorized this idea. We must perform. We must produce. And if I don't, then I feel like a failure. So this idea is instilled in the subject that we have to perform. That makes us rush. That makes us accumulate. That makes us try to make ourselves visible everywhere. And there's not enough time to do all of this. This is something that we hear in our chit-chat with people every day. We're always complaining that we don't have enough time to perform as much as we're expected to. So this idea is instilled in the subject. We are making ourselves perform. It's also something that's instilled in the relationships between different subjects. So we compete with others. We are racing against each other. This is, generally speaking, how we relate to other humans, by competing with them. And this leads to precarity. So if we are receiving a low salary, well, that means that we have to work even harder and run even faster, for example. And this idea has been instilled in our relationship with the planet as well. The planet is there to be exploited. It possesses resources that need to be exploited in order to produce. I would say that the extreme right is very representative of all of this, defending this idea of performance and taking it to the extreme. This is a way of not seeing the symptoms. This is the denial of the extreme right. They claim that nothing needs to be changed. They posit that this performance will continue no matter who is left behind, and people will be left behind. The poor, those who aren't able to run as fast as the others, they will fall. A Cameroon thinker wrote a very worrying book, but I think worrying is something that we have to do actually these days. It's called Contemporary Brutalism. And he talks about this. So we have to run. Some people won't be able to run as fast, and we have to be ruthless with them. Migrants, the poor, they will fall behind. And we will tell them as well. In the past, they fell behind, but we didn't tell them that they were going to die. But now we can tell them. That's one of Trump's main mottos, no? Let's say what we haven't said historically. So, that's how we need to think. Looking first of all at the symptoms, at the problems. And now, because this emphasis on performance is so instilled in our own physical bodies, in our institutions, etc., critical discourse is not able to change our way of thinking. We don't challenge this. We can be very critical of capitalism, but reproduce it in our day-to-day lives. So this critical discourse isn't being taken on board, and it isn't becoming a way of life. And of course, complaining is our national sport. We love complaining about people and politics. But it isn't changing anything. It isn't transforming anything. It's pointing fingers, it's cancelling people, but it's not changing anything. These days we try to seduce people with storytelling. That's the new fashion in media these days. But this storytelling isn't working either. We don't need new stories. We need new experiences. We need to experience things in a different way, different types of relationships with other people and with the environment. We don't need a new story. We need new experiences that change us and help us towards a new reality with ourselves, with each other, and with the planet. So, criticism's not working, storytelling's not working. We need experiences. We need to feel things that make us want to do things differently. So 2 more thoughts. So 3 collapses, 3 ecologies. If there are 3 collapses, intimate, social, and planetary, then we need 3 ecologies. The relationship with ourselves, our relationship with others, and our relationship with the planet. So taking care of ourselves, taking care of each other, taking care of the planet, seeing all of these things as ecologies. And we need to think about this as something connected. How are we going to change a way of life that is leading to a climate emergency if we don't change the way that we live on a day-to-day basis? So these 3 levels are intimately connected. There's a French thinker that I really recommend, Félix Guattari. He has a beautiful book about this 3 ecologies, Félix Guattari. His book is called The 3 Ecologies, and he says that these 3 connect together to form ecosophia, which is, of course, describing the ecos, the home, this network of links between us and with the planet, and the knowledge about all of these links. So, I think this is important because the change to change how we coexist with the planet, then we need to change our awareness, change the way that we experience what affects us in the world. Heidegger is a philosopher who asks about how the world appears to us. He suggests that the world is seen as a petrol station that we visit to simply get fuel. So how can we change this? Well, we have to change our awareness completely. When we talk about degrowth, we need to desire this degrowth, this reduction in growth. If there's no desire, if there's no will, then it won't be possible. A good life is dependent on this degrowth. But how can we change our desires? How do our desires change? This is a philosophical issue. I will try to finish so we can have time for questions. So, Ecosophia, the transformation of desires. What are human desires? This is a key topic in philosophy. The essence of the human being, according to many philosophers, is desire. That is the essence of human beings. But we often confuse this idea of desire with a desire for a thing, a trip, a person, an object. So it's important to differentiate a desire for something and desire as something that drives us in our lives. Desire isn't a special treat. It's not satisfied with an object. Rather, it's something that drives us in our lives. So how can we make the politics of the future able to change our desires, to stop seeing the world as something that is there as a petrol station to give us fuel? We need to promote other relationships, like, for instance, a teacher who tends to garden with his students. That's perhaps a better way to look at the planet. So, politics need to change our desires. It needs to incorporate art, therapy. We need to completely rethink what political action is. Aesthetics, therapeutics, and education. These all need to form part. I'm just giving you a lot of very brief ideas which I hope we'll be able to develop together afterwards. There's another beautiful book that I recommend, Eco-Spirituality for Lay People. It was written by a poet and an activist, and he talks about how to make ecology something that is no longer just something that we worry about, but is something that is a part of our whole lives. It's called Ways of Converting Ecology into a Way of Life. That's what the subtitle of the book is. My last point goes back to psychoanalysis. Something Freud said, something worrying, but something interesting. It appears at the end of a very important book from the 20th century. And he talks about death. He says that we can't understand human beings thinking about optimism and happy things. He said actually human beings are self-destructive. They're the only beings on the planet that are able to kill themselves and also kill the entire planet. They've created nuclear bombs. So we can't look at human beings from an optimistic lens. Human beings are capable of the very worst acts. This is from the book Civilization and Its Discontent. This theory then explains why there are wars and why there is self-destruction. He suggests that this focus of human beings has nothing to do with reasoning. Reasoning isn't going to change our focus on death and destruction. This drive that we have has nothing to do with critical reasoning. We've criticized capitalism numerous times, but it still exists. It's still there. It hasn't changed anything. So truth is powerless. Truth does nothing if it doesn't link with what Freud calls eros, which is love. He's not talking about just intimate partner love or love for our children, but the universal desire to preserve life. This loving link, caring link with people, with objects, with places, with bodies. That's what Freud calls eros. And the only strength that can control this drive for death is eros. And I think this is actually very true. We see in our daily lives that the only way to change behaviors is through love for somebody. Love and politics are opposites. If we look at political parties, they are driven by competition, self-destruction. But if Freud is right, and the only strength that is able to limit, to control this drive for death is love, well, how can we apply this to politics? Well, I'm going to stay here now for a few moments. I hope to be able to debate with you.
Hola. Quisiera preguntarte,
Hello.
Amador,
I would like to ask you, Amador,
sobre el deseo,
about that desire,
imaginación,
about imagination,
capacidades humanas.
and these human
¿Qué
abilities.
consideras tú que son condiciones que se pueden nutrir
What conditions do you think we can nurture individually
social
as well as socially to reactivate these abilities of desire and imagination?
porque yo considero que están cooptadas, ¿no?
I ask this because I think they have been limited. Technology has changed the way in which we link, in which we relate to desire, which is such a human ability. So what do you think are the conditions we can nurture individually and socially to drive or move forward to desire and Yes, I have a fun story together with a friend of mine who's a psychoanalyst. We were in the Madrid underground. And usually you look around and no one is talking to each other. People don't talk. Everyone is just focused on the screens. Maybe if I hadn't been there with my friend, I would also be just with my eyes glued to the screen. This friend of mine, who's a psychoanalyst, told me, well, there must be something quite serious happening in people's psyche. Why? Well, because there's a channel between the... usually we are not aware, but we have unconscious mind. We have a subconscious. We usually forget about it, but we have it. If I'm on the underground, or taking the tram, if I don't want to bore myself to death, then I have to use imagination. That's what children do. It's second nature. But if you're bored, that's emptiness. That means emptiness. And then we need to activate imagination. I remember going to church as a child, and I had to sing along, because if not, I would get very bored. And of course, I don't mean to be disrespectful to people who enjoy the ceremony, but for me, it was a moment of emptiness. And I used imagination in order to escape that boredom. So boredom is emptiness, and emptiness leads to desire and imagination. What capitalism does is that we are limited. The channel is being shut down. We need an open channel. We need some emptiness within our lives. We need to not know what to do. We need to have that opportunity to create our own paths. If we're always buying this life package we're offered, ways to be ourselves, ways to desire, ways to live, then all path to desire is shut, it's blocked. Instead of flowing along a path of discovery of our own desires and our imagination, we are on a blocked path where we're already being told what to do, what to desire. That's why Simone Weil links desire with imagination, and that the prerequisite is emptiness, a void. We need some sort of void, wait, a moment where we do not know what is happening or what we need to do. Then we can create, we can play around. Right now I'm working with 14, 15-year-old kids in schools, and nowadays I see they have no time to get bored. They're just scrolling through the screens. If we scroll, we're bored, we start scrolling through our phones, and then nothing happens. We just look at different options that don't lead anywhere at all. Usually we end up glued to our screens, and after an hour we wonder what happened. Where's my time gone? What sort of trap did I fall into? What sort of rabbit hole? So the way in which capital captures attention is by showing us immediate results, immediate answers, not leaving any channels open. Fantasy, imagination, desire can only start if we have this sort of void, this moment of boredom, of emptiness, of not knowing, of waiting around. That's why a lockdown was so frustrating for so many people. Of course, there were also material challenges, but for others, suddenly having so much time available was torture. Oh well, that's the answer I thought about from this story, me and my colleague in the underground. Mr. Carmelo has another question. Very interesting. From these three collapses, how do we relate collapse to crisis? Do you think collapse is a crisis? Are these three types of crisis? Because we usually talk in those terms. We talk about crisis. And usually we compare that to a time where there were no crises at all. How can we compare these collapses to the history of these collapses? Are there any reference points, moments in history where we might not have been suffering from that collapse? Is there a past without those collapses, or have they always been around? Now, on the other hand, you talk about the system, about capitalism, and how it contributes or leads to these collapses. Are there any alternatives to the capitalistic system? Yes, we would need to convert, and would need to define crisis as you understand it, or I do. However, it has been abused, misused by the press. We talk about a mental health crisis, school crisis, ecological crisis. It would be acceptable, yes, to talk about it. Moments in which our senses are done. They don't work anymore. That's how I understand crisis. That everything I had up to one point doesn't work anymore. What worked before doesn't anymore. That's a personal crisis. So, crisis, if we understand it as a the scarcity or the loss of those resources, of those feelings, then yes, there is a crisis in the institutions, in the intimate level, feelings, and also on an ecological scale. Our senses cannot work anymore. So how can we transform crisis into a creation, a transformation process? That's the challenge. What we do not want is to be in that crisis because it hurts. You do not know which path to follow. What you knew isn't valid anymore. You feel uneasy and uneasiness. And the challenge is to convert crisis into a gesture of creation. These moments of crisis, if everything I had up to now can't be used anymore, then I have a chance, an opportunity to reinvent, to create policies, schools, everything. We do not know how to deal with crisis. We haven't been trained on it. Everything is good. We need to perform. You need to be healthy. You need to have energy. But when everything goes wrong, we do not know what to do with it, and we just try to leave it behind. Mindfulness, therapy, pills, different drugs. We do not know how to deal with that, so we just try to skip ahead, to leave it behind. But I believe that actually this crisis is a lever for creativity, for a new way of living. What's the extreme right nowadays? The extreme right parties. Crises are there, but don't worry, we don't need to act on it. We just need to point fingers at those immigrants, those miners who are trying to cross the wall, to jump over the fence. All these people are at fault. You don't need to change anything to solve this crisis. We're just going to eliminate these subjects, and then we will make America great again. We just build a wall, and then prosperity will be back, and we go back to track. We go back to normality, into the greatness of the past. Something that is difficult, that is easy to do, but something that is difficult to achieve is to create an opportunity out of a crisis, to convert it into a process of creation. That is hard to achieve. I have no problems with parties, left-wing parties, but it's not enough. What they're doing is not enough to respond to the disaster we are facing. We need new ways. What has been the basis so far cannot be the basis in the future because it's not working anymore. We need to learn what to do, and to do it together as a collective. That's a social movement too, in fact. The social creation of new senses for our lives. When the pillars that we had in the past do not work anymore. Amador, I would like to share some knowledge about the Canary Islands. We have met each other in the past while talking about tourism. Now, in the framework of this reflection you've shared with us, I would like you to maybe expand a bit while talking about the Canary Islands, about its nature as an outermost region, as an effort to really dive into it. As Matthias said at the beginning, well, I don't know if I would dare. Yeah, maybe as a visitor, you can share your perspective. Well, I really wanted to just converse with you, but let me think about what I could say. Well, maybe crisis at times also misused. In La Palma, we heard about this debate of what should happen after the volcano erupted. How to reinvent the island after what happened. How they take it into account. There were people that believed that there will be some profit to be made from the crisis. New economic systems to continue making profit, to continue with this performance guideline. I remember that debate around what should be done after the volcano erupted. And there was a movement. I didn't get to learn much about it, but I think it's interesting. This movement of Canarias tiene un límite. The Canary Islands have reached their limit. And that really means that the Canary Islands are done. They cannot give more. Nature, the bodies, have a limit. So that slogan, the Canary Islands have a limit, means we've had enough. We cannot continue putting more pressure into this body or it might explode. It might backfire. I don't know what has happened with that movement, how it has continued, what they have reflected on, and how they can transform the territory, the land, the region. But usually a movement uses a crisis in a creative way. They put their bodies at play, they develop new senses, new thinking processes about what politics are. Politics is about learning how to live together. We're social animals. And sometimes we need to think about how we want to work together. And I believe that movement was really interesting in that regard. I don't know what has become of it, but I would listen to it, to the collective expressions of that happened during a crisis. Usually the symptom is to try and find an exit to that crisis, and these social movements are a manifestation of it. With tourism too. Of course, I know this is quite a tricky domain. I feel that I'm just, while talking about it, I don't feel like I have both of my career on the ground. I feel quite unstable. It's a slippery slope. Tourism has been a very important industry in Spain in general. It affects the housing prices. It affects the way we live in cities and in towns. It has direct material consequences. The last time I was here, I heard about the sheer number of tourists that visit every year the islands, and it was just flabbergasting. But what are tourists? There is something that creates desire within this business model. How can we transform that desire so that we can find other satisfactions, other sorts of happiness that might be more sustainable and might not come at the cost of the land, that might not come at the cost of resources and the way people live here. So we can see that desire is also part of this, of tourism. Tourism is a desire. We might not like it. Maybe it's something that we've been brainwashed into or not. But it's quite a natural response to these shitty lives we have. In the summer, we might go somewhere, we might escape to that piece of happiness. It's a promise of happiness. That's what the concept we play with when we talk about tourism, and we try to sell it. To in some way compensate a bad life. Well, as you see, I'm just, sharing some thoughts. I have lost my train of thought a few times, but I think after 2 trips to dare and make a final conclusion on the situation here would be too daring on my part. So I hope that was enough. Thank you. Now we have Cristina and then José Luis.
Amador.
I would like to hear you talk about, maybe you have a recommendation or an appreciative perspective. We have a small group of people. We try to connect people who participate in listening groups, people that have been victims of abuse and they cannot receive individual therapy, so they go to group therapies. They listen to each other, and that really helps them. Connecting to other people that have gone through this common crisis helps them out. We want to connect these people through their experiences, but also with the sea. Maybe to tell them as if they were another participant of that group therapy, to tell them of the problems of the sea and maybe use it as a source of inspiration to see all the waste that is being collected from the sea and then create artworks with that, to activate a different part of their brains and transform frustration, anger into something beautiful, something that might not be useful but that might be transformative. It has no impact at all in public policies, or it has no large-scale impact, but it works at an individual level, social level, and on the planet level, the three echoes you mentioned. Would you maybe share some recommendation in this regard? Is it sexual abuse? No, it's violence at home or in the workplace, bullying, mobbing, or abuse in their homes, yes. I think I would need to learn a bit more about what group exactly you're talking about. There are things that you cannot answer from the outside. You need to really land on the topic, understand the whole context. But what I can do is share some of my experiences. After 2004, when Al-Qaeda attacked the trains in Madrid, I participated in the association that supported the people affected by the 11M by 5/11 attacks. And at that time, we didn't speak about victims. We changed the wording. We didn't describe them as victims. We described them as people that were affected. Those of us who had not lost anyone during those attacks could also participate. And for the people that were directly affected, it was healing to hear about other people that were not directly affected, to be a part of that group. And then I saw that there's a part of politics that can also be healing and therapeutical. Therapy is something that has an individual dimension, for sure. But working in groups, group therapy can be really healing. To rethink everything that has been demolished by these attacks, or creative abilities, or will to live. So the political and the therapeutical can be brought together. And it's also very interesting to see how some connections can be made between victims and people who haven't been victims of that, but still can listen to those stories. I think the act of listening in itself, which has become quite a scarce in our current societies, is something to value. Usually people nowadays don't listen to each other. Why should I be listening to you? I've seen it in schools. Many of the students feel unease because people don't listen to their voices. They're there in some sort of content dispenser machinery at school. They're trying to process all that content, one after the other, one lesson after the other. And by the end of the day, they haven't been able to raise their voices about what they think about the world, about what they are going through. In a dialogue, we need to also be able to listen. People need to be listened to. We have our own stories, our own perspectives. Stuff happens to us. And that's how we humanize that relationship. Simone Weil speaks about how attention is not only focusing, it's the basis of social links. That's why we talk about primary attention centers. We need the basis for these links is for me to ask each other, to ask, what's your storm? What's happening to you? What's your uneasiness? Maybe we don't know that response, that answer beforehand. Everything that I've just mentioned can be brought up in this sort of group therapy, where we try to rebuild those links, where we try to rebuild our personal space and state. And this group, where we worked with the 11th of March affected people, there were also another group of people that had suffered from a fire in Guadalajara, and they ended up sharing their pain and how they had been able to move forward after that pain, to escape of that condition of victim. They were not re-victimizing themselves. They state, okay, this happened to me, but it does not define me. That was an interesting process. That pain does not define my identity. That abuse doesn't define me. I'm that, but I'm so much more. And I can do something with that thing that happened to me. Well, I don't know if my answer is enough, but that's what I wanted to say. Thank you. I wanted to know, you wrote some ethical principles, a book on that we all know. What can we do against this brutalism of social networks? What we've seen with Donald Trump, people to listen to the different channels to see what is being done, how he's exercising brutalism. And also, what do you think about two things we're doing at our school? A lot of theater. Theater does not allow screens to come into play, and as well as planting your own forests to build with nature. What are your thoughts on these different topics and ideas? Well, now we'll be speaking about myself, Amador, not the one on the ethics, but me, myself. Ethics is linked to relationships. What is being put at risk in a relationship? It is more than the law, than the lawmaking process. It has to do with relationships at school, friendships, everything that relationships involves. We have the law, we have the state that codifies this number of possibilities or situations. But then there's another dimension, and we are responsible for that other dimension, the quality of the relationships we build. Well, the state is at fault for me not having any friends. No. What's going on with you and friendship? That is your responsibility or our responsibility. With this question from Simone Biles, I believe it's very important for this relationship with others. And that part she talks about, even when we talk about someone that has a paralysis, we have to ask them what causes them uneasiness, what torments them, what's their anguish. We should never have some preconceive what they might be going through. We shouldn't assume what they are going through. We should still ask them, not make any assumptions. We need to learn about questions that might not have an answer. I might pose some theoretical questions, but I already know the answer. However, how can we keep a conversation alive if we follow this mentality, this mindset? Well, I'm a person who loves words, but I believe that every person is linked with the words we use. We talk all the time, we live in language. Language is not just a channel. That's such a simplistic point of view. We are linguistic beings, we live within these languages. It creates world. Languages can be brutal, like Trump's. Language can also hurt, but it can also cure. A loving, caring word that can cure us. We are linguistic beings. Language is not a channel. We live in it. We should learn or educate ourselves within this linguistic dimension. We are constantly tagging each other. We cannot listen anything about reality because I always have some assumptions about what has happened with this case, with that other case. This person did that, this person did this other thing. No one wants to listen. But wait, let's listen. We have some pre-assumptions, but still let us listen to enrich our knowledge about what happened. To not put stereotypes, to not apply stereotypes, tags, or just to let ourselves be surprised by other people. That has to do with these ethical and deeply meaningful language. That's what these students complain about. We're no subjects in these classrooms, we're just objects destined to listen and consume content, but nothing more. However, we are subjects. We're not meant to be objects. We should be part in this world of language, in this world of social media, of cancelling, of everyone knowing everything that's happening and everyone judging everything in the blink of an eye. What we need is this ability to listen, to wait and listen, and then ask a question. Which answer I do not know. Thank
you. Moisés. I will try to be brief. Just one reflection I wanted to ask you. You spoke about pain and blame and loss. And you talked about experiences. How much loss do you think we need to experience to be able to understand what's going on? And you also talked about optimism and pessimism. We need to be realistic. So how can we play with these three concepts in a very complex world, and a world that has managed to find solutions for some of its complex problems in the past? Well, in the world of psychoanalysis, it's about learning to accept loss, and that's something key. And that's why our world is in such a state, because we always want to win. Netanyahu, for instance, has promised his people a total victory. These are morbid words of death, talking about brutalism in language. Total victory equals total domination. So learning to lose, a truce, an armistice, is important, so that the world isn't completely destroyed. If we're always getting revenge for what someone else has done, an eye for an eye. So, Learning to accept loss means not being obsessed with this total victory. And in life, we lose things, we lose abilities, we get old. That can be considered a loss. Loved ones die, that's a loss. And if we don't accept that loss, that means we want to be transhumans, like Elon Musk says. We want to be transported into a machine to never age, to never die. And we don't want people that have low energy or are depressed or have an illness. What a horrible world to live in, right? So we need to accept loss and also accept that we might learn something from loss. People that lose their country accept that loss creatively and are able to build a new life elsewhere. Rather than clinging on to that loss, they turn their crisis into a new possibility for life. So learning to lose then is actually very difficult at an individual level, at a collective level too. We're told that we need to win, we need to be right in every debate. We're always trying to impose our points of view on other people. But there is something that we do lose, and that is the links, the relationships that connect us. Well, I think we've had a fantastic last hour of the conference. One of the conclusions I would draw is that there are lots of questions still in the air. For instance, this idea of the three collapses, the three crises, as Carmelo mentioned, and the need to try to prevent these collapses, linking it to desires. And linking it to our need to create projects that connect things that will create a better future than what we're facing today. I think it's been a really interesting conversation, but there's a lot to reflect on. And now we can go on to reflect gradually, slowly, and plant the seeds for a society that we want to live in. Thank you very much, Amador. Thank you, everybody.